Smart politics for stupid times. Welcome to the Unprecedented Podcast with John Aravosis and Cliff Schechter.
Welcome, everyone. It is Monday, March, 24th, 25th. What the heck the date? 19th. I'm already ahead of myself. And this is John Aravosis sitting in for Leslie Marshall and also kind of sitting in for Cliff Schechter, who is my usual cohort on this show. We run the Unprecedented Podcast, and this hour we're going to be doing the unprecedented thing along with hosting for Leslie. I've got my producer Mark Grimaldi with me. Hey, Marky. And we're going to get into the two big topics today are going to be Cambridge Analytica and the big Facebook mess that you've all been hearing about, the privacy violation, the crazy Russia angle, all sorts of things with the Trump campaign. And then we're going to talk about the latest Trump insanity watch. But first, and then actually we're going to close at the end with a discussion about Jared Kushner, slumlord, and my friend Damian Corboy, longtime New Yorker who is very up on real estate stuff in New York and how landlords find just the craziest way to screw tenants. He was telling me this weekend stuff that I was like, oh my God. So Damian's going to join us and talk a little bit about what does it mean when landlords basically lie about rent control. Like what do they actually do, and how basically it means they're going to do really awful things to their tenants and stuff that's more awful than I could even imagine, but sounds like New York. I mean, the bad side of New York. I love New York. I loved living there, but the crazy side. But the first thing I wanted to talk about was just sort of an interesting thing. I'm not much of a John Kennedy assassination expert, but I am a fan of the Antiques Roadshow, and I was watching that this weekend, and all of a sudden they're interviewing some woman who was in the White House press office with JFK, and she must have been pretty young at the time because she's still alive today, 60 years later practically. And she's talking about how her collection she's got the actual press schedule from the day Kennedy was shot, showing all the events, including the lunch he was supposed to arrive at, but obviously didn't because then he was shot and killed. And she's talking about it, and he asks her, the antique expert, about, where were you that day? And she says, I was on Air Force One. And she says, oh, wow, and what happened? Well, we ended up having to, I took the backup plane because I was the president's staff, but he died. So Lyndon Johnson, who then became president, immediately needed his staff because it was his Air Force One, right? So they didn't want Kennedy's staff hanging around. She said a little thing about her flight back that I did a double take. The antique dealer kind of went, oh, and then he moved on like nothing had happened. And I went back to my TV and played it again and went, did I just hear what I thought I heard? I mean, basically, she said, I flew back on the backup plane. We went with the Texas delegation, and depending on the use of the terminology, Texas delegation usually means congressional delegation, meaning all the congressmen and senators from Texas, but it could also mean the delegation of Texas officials flying back to Washington with Johnson, who now became president, right? So we don't quite know if she means members of Congress, staff, governor's staff, who knows? But it's official Texas government personnel she means, and possibly federal. And she says, and it was a very unpleasant flight because a number of them were a little bit happy about it on the way back, basically saying they were a little bit happy that Kennedy was shot and killed. And I heard that, I was like, oh my God. And I mean, Again, I'm not a Kennedy expert, so I was not aware of that. I took a clip, put it on Twitter anyway, thinking maybe I'm not the only one who hasn't heard this before. And it really went far. I think Jake Tapper at CNN had retweeted it. A number of journalist friends of mine, everyone thought it was really interesting. And I did have one guy respond, and maybe he was telling the truth. He was sort of angry at it. He thought I was making it partisan, and I said, I didn't say Republicans or Democrats. I just said Texas delegation. He said the Texas delegation back then was a lot of Democrats, which it may have been. Mind you, early 60s, a lot of Democrats were Democrats who then became Republicans, because remember, the Democratic Party started liking blacks and Republicans were like, but it doesn't really matter. The point was that you had that kind of animosity back then, that the president would literally have his head blown off and people would be like, yeah. Even with Trump, like, I don't want an assassination, for a number of reasons. I mean, A, it's just not very nice, but B, that's not the kind of thing you want happening in our political culture, because once things like that happen, more things like that happen. It's one of the reasons, it's the main reason I worry about Donald Trump, well, there's a lot of reasons I worry about Donald Trump, but one of them is he's establishing a new culture of behavior where, guess what? Next time an accused pedophile runs, people are going to go on the Republican side, who cares? You know, we did it once and there was nothing to pay for it, right? He's breaking down barriers. All the Nazi garbage, you know, that he's been sucking up to the alt-right neo-Nazis, all that stuff he hasn't really paid a price for yet, and it starts to send a message that, well, if you can find a political benefit to doing all these things that used to be bad, then maybe they're okay to do. And assassination works that way too. And it was a problem in the Middle East and still has been, that I'd learned in my courses at Georgetown and grad school, that assassination became a real culture there. It was the 50s or the 60s that it began, but taking out Middle East leaders. And it just went on and on with Egypt, with Jordan, you name it. So in any case, but no, I wanted to talk a little bit about Kate McKinnon. Folks, it was funny actually when I mentioned this on Twitter the other day. Some people even asked me who she was, which goes to prove the underlying point of what I'm about to talk about, which is don't assume that because you and your friends know something, it's widely known. It's interesting. Sometimes things are widely known because you're an idiot if you don't know about it. Sometimes things are only widely known in your circles and you don't realize that it hasn't gotten wider. But Kate is the woman on Saturday Night Live who does the Hillary Clinton impression. She also does famously the Jeff Sessions, Attorney General Jeff Sessions impression, and does a lot of other people too. This weekend she did Betsy DeVos, the Education Secretary, and maybe I'll start with Mark playing a little bit of her Education Secretary Betsy DeVos impersonation. This was a response to DeVos doing this horrific 60 Minutes interview last week with Leslie Stahl, or maybe a week ago, where she was just a blithering idiot, and Leslie was asking her stuff that wasn't that hard, like, oh, so, you were a big education person in Michigan. Did you ever go to any bad schools in Michigan? No. You think maybe you should have? I think maybe I should have. And you're like, lady, who are you? It was like watching Fargo, but with like a Michigan accent instead of North Dakota. But anyway, so Kate McKinnon did a little bit of an impersonation of that interview that is on SNL this weekend. Look at it if you've got it, or I'm sure it's on YouTube or somewhere. But one thing, it was kind of interesting. So this lesbian writer or somebody tweets out something. She was having a fight with somebody, I don't know, on Twitter, but having a fight with somebody about Saturday Night Live, and was saying, well, gay men aren't the only gay people out there. I mean, I'm gay, so I can get into this. Gay men aren't the only gay people out there. We've got women representing us, and that's fine. Look at SNL. And I went, who on SNL is openly gay? What am I missing at Saturday Night Live? What am I missing here? I said, and the fact that I don't know they're openly gay, are they really representing the gay community if I have no idea if they're gay? And I put, if a tree falls in the forest. But it's an interesting question for, and we'll get to this in a second too, but communities that are trying to, especially I would say like the transgender community, for example, communities that are lesser known, that what you do know, maybe you don't understand, right? Once upon a time, people thought gay people were pedophiles. I don't know. Now whatever you don't understand about transgender people, that the more people that come out, the more you know about, celebrities, etc., you get to know them and you go, oh, these are normal people just like me. So the visibility is important. And I simply said, like, who's gay on SNL that I didn't, openly gay? And I'm thinking Leslie Jones or something. I was like, is she gay? Like, I have no idea. Well, so I get these angry tweets back. It's Kate McKinnon. She's a lesbian. And you should have known it. And then I was getting all these angry tweets about how I didn't know Kate McKinnon was gay. And I was like, well, first of all kind of was being careful, because I was like, okay, just because people on Twitter tell me she's gay, does that mean she's gay? But enough people told me that I guess it's well known she's gay. But there's a couple things here. One of which was the point I just made, that if you're trying to show visibility to convince people that your community is actually normal people, then people need to actually know you're gay before they can actually say gay people are normal. Because otherwise, I thought Kate McKinnon was like a really funny straight lady. Not that I care, but I mean, it was, whatever. The second thing that was interesting was the number of people supportive, and I think there are people on the left who wrote me back and said, why does it matter? Who cares if she's gay? Why are you asking this? And I just, during the break, I even wrote back to somebody on Twitter when you guys were getting your commercial there, your very good commercial, that, the guy said to me the same thing, and I wrote back and I said, well, why does it matter? What does it matter? And I said, well, it doesn't matter, except that it does matter, so it does matter. And the point is, yeah, you're right, it doesn't matter if somebody's gay or straight, who cares? It's like being black or white, right? Who cares if somebody's black or white? Except that society cares if you're black and white, or black or white. Actually, they care if you're black and white too, like Obama. They care if you're gay, They care if you're trans. Some people accept you, other people don't. Other people discriminate against you. Other people pass laws. In Florida, they're trying to pass more laws in Florida, making it harder for gay people to adopt, right? We're still fighting that crazy battle. Transgender people, even worse. There's all sorts of battles with that they're not even allowed in the military. So people care, clearly, if you're trans, gay, black, Jewish, whatever. So, well, God, the Jewish, there's a play about the Holocaust going on in Maine right now, and the people putting on the play are getting hate mail from people that don't want to hear about Jews, right? I mean, it still matters if you're Jewish. So the point here is that because there are elements of society that are strong enough that care that you're a minority, or that care that you're a woman, right? That maybe want to discriminate you because you're a woman, or maybe want to sexually harass you, treat you differently on the job, not hire you, fire you, want favors, whatever. Therefore, it is important for people to be open about who they are. Yes, women, fair enough, right? But in a women's case, I would say it's the same argument in the sense that it's important for women to stand up, or to create an environment in which women feel they can stand up and talk about sexual harassment, talk about people who have bullied them, or not bullied them, but actually sexually harassed them on the job, right? Or discriminated against them on the job because they're women. You've got to create a culture where they're comfortable doing that so that the problem can be fixed. And it's the same thing with gay people, trans people, whatever. A lot of kids are growing up in parts of the country where it's still not okay to be gay and or trans. And for them to see role models like Kate McKinnon, they're able to say, my God, there's these stars, right? When I was growing up in the 90s, we didn't even have anybody on TV who was openly gay back in the 90s. The late 90s, we had Ellen DeGeneres. And her coming out was not only a big deal, but it was a very dangerous deal. People thought it was going to kill her career, right? So my generation already, I grew up in a vacuum. We just didn't have role models that we could look up to and say, wow, you can be gay and not be a pervert, not be crazy, not be hated. In any case, so I didn't want to make this sort of a whole gay segment, but it was interesting to me because it just, I had no idea she was gay. And it also, the sort of final point was it was also a Twitter lesson I wanted to have with people, which is just that. Don't assume just because you know something that everybody else knows it. And don't get pissed off at people who don't know what you know. Like you're not genetically born knowing who's gay, straight, or frankly, even who's black or white or trans, right? Half the people I follow on Twitter, even some of the celebrity types, journalists I follow, I don't know if they're black or white. I have no idea. So don't assume somebody knows that about somebody, and don't get mad at them when they don't know. This is, and I'm probably old enough that I don't care about it, but you get to a certain age where you learn these things and you don't really care that people get pissed. But anyway, I think it's important. So, like I said, there were a number of little lessons in that segment, but when we come back, we are going to talk about Cambridge Analytica like I wanted to, and then talk about our Trump Crazy Watch update. So we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. This is John Aravosis with the Unprecedented Podcast, sitting in for Leslie Marshall. And boy, have we got breaking news for you. I was waiting for this to come out. There was a Channel 4 expose, a top British news station, and they've done a lot of really great exposés. It's almost like 60 minutes here in the States. They do these kind of investigative stories. And they had a story coming out tonight at 7 o'clock London time, which was the last hour or so. And I was waiting for it because it was about Cambridge Analytica, which we were going to talk about next anyway. And the story was that Channel 4 sent somebody undercover to talk to the head of Cambridge Analytica, the same company that worked for Donald Trump to help get him elected. And apparently, according to a lot of people, according to even Nick Confessori at the New York Times, because he already knew what it was about, said, groundbreaking, horrifying news. Well, the video is out. I don't have time to watch it yet because it's 20 minutes, but the story is out. And I'm going to read you parts of this story. It is not just shocking what this company does, it's illegal what this company does, but it is also, this is the company that worked with Donald Trump. This is the company that approached the Russians about working for them. Listen to what they did and think about what happened with the Russians and Trump, and ask yourselves if this sounds like a very similar moral compass, okay? I'm going to just read, this is from Channel 4's website, channel4.com. Senior executives at Cambridge Analytica, the data company that credits itself with Donald Trump's presidential victory, have been secretly filmed saying they could entrap politicians in compromising situations with bribes and Ukrainian sex workers. In an undercover investigation by Channel 4 News, the company's chief executive Alexander Nix, that's the head of Cambridge Analytica, said the British firm secretly campaigns in elections across the world. This includes operating through a web of shadowy front companies, subcontractors. In one exchange, when asked about digging up material on political opponents, Mr. Nix said they could, quote, send some girls around to the candidate's house, adding that Ukrainian girls are very beautiful. I find that works very well. In another, he said, quote, we'll offer a large amount of money to the candidate to finance his campaign in exchange for land, for instance. We'll have the whole thing recorded, we'll blank out the face of our guy, and then we'll post it on the internet. That would be illegal on multiple levels, including offering bribes. It doesn't matter if you say, I was kidding. Unfrickin' believable. A little bit more from the article. Mr. Turnbull, who's the managing director of CA Political Global, I gotta see what that is. Anyway, there's somebody either working with Cambridge Analytica, CA. Cambridge Analytical Political Global, that's what CA means. Mr. Turnbull described how, having obtained damaging material on opponents, Cambridge Analytica can discreetly push it onto social media and the internet. Listen closely, folks. He said, we just put information into the bloodstream of the internet and then watch it grow. Give it a little push every now and again, like a remote control. It has to happen without anyone thinking that's propaganda. Because the moment you think it's propaganda, the next question is, who's put that out? Now, think of what this entire discussion has been about with regards to the Trump campaign, the Russians, fake news, right? All the bots that were out there working, somehow helping send all the WikiLeaks information that we now know was stolen by the Russians, you know, from the DNC servers, from John Podesta's, how all of it would mysteriously go out there. And then we would see these Russian Twitter accounts jump in and they would push every little issue for Trump, right? There was a shooting, they would take Trump's side. Every issue that came up, these Russian bots would jump and start to miraculously push Trump's message. And we'd all kept asking ourselves, how is this happening? Where are these guys coming from? These mysterious behind-the-scenes bots. Are they Russians? What are they? And now we find out that Cambridge Analytica does, well, that kind of thing. They put information in the bloodstream of the internet and then watch it grow, giving it a little push now and then, while hiring hookers to set up candidates and offering bribes to candidates to get it on film and then, I don't know, blackmail the candidates? Hell, honestly, this sounds like what the Russians were, what people are concerned maybe the Russians did to Trump. Mark, I'm ready to throw my computer across the room. So the story that was going on until today, when we find out that they hire basically hookers and bribe candidates, was that Cambridge Analytica hires some research, actually, and this story now sounds all the more real, okay? The rest of what I'm gonna tell you, now you're gonna go, absolutely, it sounds real, knowing what we just learned about Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica hires a researcher, the story goes, some years back, and the researcher goes on Facebook and creates an app, you know, a little toy people can download with their Facebook page or their Facebook app, and it's a personality app. Frankly, it sounds, I would have looked at it and thought it was the freaking Scientologists. You know, get your personality checked. You know, those of us who've been around the psychologists know, don't get near anything like that. But they've got a personality app, and you download it, and it's only for quote-unquote academic purposes, so you're totally safe. Oh, okay, great. And you can put in, it scours your Facebook page, it looks, you know, who you are, where you're from, all of that, who are your friends, and all the likes you've put. And anybody who doesn't use Facebook, likes are simply your friends put up funny pictures. They put up news stories about candidates you like, news stories about candidates you hate. And you can click like on it, and it's something you do, frankly, to help your friends out to a degree, right? If your friend puts something up and you like it, you click like to also because you want a lot of likes because it means people, you know, are engaged and you did something good, right? But it also means I'm indicating what kind of news I like, right? Am I more Hillary? Am I more Trump? Am I more gay rights? Am I more guns? If I am guns, is it a pro-gun or an anti-gun? So they're getting this whole back background on who you really are and what you think, what pushes your buttons. Well, this academic researcher was actually working for Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica gets all of his data on 50 million Facebook users. They now analyze it, figure out every single thing that makes these people tick, sell it to Donald Trump. Donald Trump now is able to go either target ads on the internet, or you could also use it for going door to door. You know, get out the vote, they say, or even before get out the vote, how people canvass neighborhoods, and your campaign will literally send people door to door to knock on doors and say, you know, Mrs. So-and-so, are you voting this week? We want to talk to you about our candidate. Well, with this kind of data, they literally can know, okay, Mrs. So-and-so, she cares about gay rights, hates them, and she really cares about guns. She's always talking about guns on Facebook. Okay, great. Bring up those issues with her. Okay. And then the next door, oh, that's Mr. So-and-so, you know, he cares about pizza. I don't know. But the point is, you target it to that degree, right? So they lie. They lie to Facebook. They lie to us. Facebook doesn't even check to see how the information is being used. They just took the researcher's word for it that it was academic research. 2 years ago, Facebook finds out about all about this, doesn't do anything, doesn't tell us. We find out in the last week because I'm guessing it was the New York Times, I don't recall, breaks a big story on this, and that's how we find out. That's when Facebook decides to finally take action and temporarily suspend Cambridge Analytica from Facebook. But they didn't do it for 2 years that they knew this until they got publicly caught. Well, then Facebook starts putting out these messages from their top officials saying there was no data breach. There was no breach. People voluntarily gave this information, and people went down their throats and said, people gave this information to somebody claiming they were an academic researcher. They didn't give this to somebody saying, I work for the Trump campaign, or I work for right-wing politicians, including the Russians. We thought, you said you were an academic researcher. I thought maybe I'm helping academic research and I get a fun little profile, a fun little personality profile. Isn't that fun, right? So Facebook is like denying all this last week. Well, finally, Facebook realized everyone's ready to kill them and Mark Zuckerberg can kiss his presidential aspirations goodbye. Facebook finally backs off and goes, oh, maybe there's a problem here. Okay, maybe it's not your fault, Facebook users. At the same time, we find out that not only did they do this, but Cambridge Analytica also has contracts, or they did last year with the State Department, U.S. Department of State. They had contracts with NATO, right, our big military alliance. Their parent company is a British defense contractor, which is also interesting, right? So they're part of the British defense industry, so you'd think they'd be pro-Britain or something, right? Cambridge Analytica reaches out in 2014 to the Russians, to the Russian oil company, and says, hey, how about we give you a little talk about how to influence American voters in 2014? And we find this out now, and a lot of people go, isn't that a little strange that a British defense contractor, for starters, is reaching out to the Russians in 2000 to a Russian oil company saying, hey, Russian oil company, do you think you'd be interested in learning how we influence American voters? And the Russian oil company was very interested. Kind of makes you wonder why, huh? Well, Andrew Weiss, who I follow on Twitter, and I believe he's with the Carnegie Endowment, I'm pretty sure, here in DC, a big think tank, says, curious timing. Cambridge Analytica's late summer 2014 presentation to a top Russian oil company about election disruption techniques comes just a few months after the St. Petersburg, Russia troll factory started its own efforts. That's the big Russian fake news organization that was created, a government-run troll factory, as we call it, was created in St. Petersburg, Russia, formerly Leningrad, in 2014, right before Cambridge Analytica reached out to the Russians and said, hey, is there any reason you might be interested in how one secretly impacts American voters and now secretly does it in really scummy, backhanded ways that are kind of cheating? And this being Donald Trump, you know, his next little payoff to sex girl will come up tomorrow and we'll all forget about this. I'm blown away by it. I'm always blown away and people think I'm naive. I'm not naive. It's just, I keep sort of hoping things are going to get better and we're not going to have yet a bigger bomb, and here we go again. Had this been Hillary would have been shot by a firing squad. Oh my God. And again, I don't mean to sound naive, but it's like, I keep thinking these guys couldn't get any lower. And oh my God. Oh, anyway, we're already into our next break, aren't we? You were very nice. You didn't cut me off. We're going to go to a quick break, and we're going to come. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. This is John Aravosis having an aneurysm on the Leslie Marshall Show. I am also a partner in the Unprecedented podcast, and this is our podcast episode we do during Leslie's show every week, at least for these few months. And another breaking story we've got is the U.S. Supreme Court turns down Republican leaders' request to put new Pennsylvania congressional map on hold. As you'll recall, the state court in Pennsylvania tried to fix the gerrymandering problem where Republicans redrew all the congressional districts in a way that was totally cheating, to minimize Democratic votes. And the courts redrew the maps just in the last couple of weeks. Republicans flipped out because, of course, the redraw helps Democrats because it was unfair before, and the Supreme Court at least turned down the most recent challenge to stopping that from happening. So that's really good news. The story is that Kushner's family company, or companies that have own a lot of rental properties in New York, filed false applications for construction permits in 34 buildings across New York from 2013 to 2016. All of them indicating that there were no rent-regulated or rent-controlled tenants in any of their buildings. The tax documents show that there were more than 300 rent-controlled units, in fact, when Kushner said there were none. Nearly all the permit applications were signed by a Kushner employee, including sometimes the chief operating officer. So basically, they kept lying to the city of New York about who was in their buildings, because if there were rent-controlled people in the buildings, they could, there were higher rules. The construction rules were much more strict, because, they couldn't sort of wake you up in the middle of the night, all sorts of things, right? A little bit more here. Let me just, well, let me see what there was more, yeah, so anyway, so people in the buildings were complaining. There's drilling. You heard drilling in the middle of the night. Rats were coming in from the abandoned building next door. And it made me think of something, because you had mentioned rats to me this weekend as one of the things slum landlords do in New York. I'm gonna have to cut you off, Damien, because the show is gonna end in 40 minutes. I was gonna ask you about the crazy new stuff about Trump. I'm calling you afterwards so we can bitch on the phone together, because I'm like livid about the Trump news with Cambridge Analytica. Google it, it's insane. Anyway, folks, thanks for joining us today. We didn't get to talk about the crazy Trump King Lear madness, but this Cambridge Analytica news overtook it, and my God, that's just incredible. I'm John Aravosis. I host the Unprecedented podcast with my cohort Cliff Schechter. You can find us online at patreon.com/unprecedentedpodcast. You can also find us at unprecedentedpodcast.com. This week, we're going to be interviewing Shannon Watts, who runs Moms Demand Action, a really powerful gun control group, in anticipation of the big anti-gun march this weekend that the kids from Parkland, Florida are organizing. Make sure you show up in DC on Saturday. Thank you. Have a good week.